Hi, I'm Robin and I'm probably best known for creating online shooting content here in the UK under the branded name Team Foxer. So I've been asked to produce a video helping those, detailing perhaps how to get started at shooting foxes predominantly, but you could use some of this information to help you get into shooting other quarry species as well. First off, a bit about me for those that don't know my background. I actually started shooting at the tender age of 13 years old. Thanks to and facilitated by my older brother, I acquired an air rifle, and unbeknown to my mother, she wouldn't have been happy knowing that I had it, but I kept it in my fishing holdall underneath the bed because I knew that was the one place she would never look. And when she was out and I was able to, I had that air rifle out. I was practicing targets in the back garden. I became very proficient. It had open sight, so no scope, iron sighted rifle, and I could actually take out the central digit on a playing card at the bottom of the garden. That was around 20 meters. And one of my other favourite tips to teach me how to shoot was to try and snap matchsticks as well. So we'd stick them in various different things on a fence, and then we would shoot those to see if we could snap them. So that's how I got started, and that actually taught me rule number one of shooting, in fact, which was to practice, practice, practice. Even to this day, I will still go out with rifles, and every other outing I will take practice shots at targets so that I know I'm fully in sync with the rifle, and it gives me 100% confidence when pulling that trigger. You should be able to feel your way around the rifle, change the magazine, etc., etc., in complete darkness, and that's and also safely, of course, as well. And in practicing, even if it's in the kitchen, your bedroom, wherever that may be, it sounds a bit daft, but kind of practice cocking the rifle, loading the magazine, unloading the magazine, checking for blockages, etc., etc. Do it all safely in a controlled environment, so that when you're out in the field, if anything happens, you instinctively know exactly where to look and how to sort out the issue. So over the years, I continue to use various different air rifles, predominantly for back garden plinking, target practice, and maybe the odd garden pest, rat round the pond, for example. And then in the early 2000s, I purchased one of the very first generation Air Arms S410s. And then a chance meeting from a friend of a friend who came round one evening, noticed a gun case lent up in the corner of the room, asked me what it was, we got talking, and that was it. That was the start of our blossoming friendship. Anyway, he asked me if I'd ever been lamping before. I really didn't know what it was. He told me all about it, told me that he used to go on an old pig farm in Norfolk. Would I like to go along one evening, because he hadn't done it for ages. I had no kit, so I literally had my rifle, my pellets, and that was it. I actually strapped, I think I even taped it, or it might have been a rubber band, I can't remember, but it was old school. I actually had a torch and just had it resting on top of the scope, and that's how it started. And after that night, after I'd managed to shoot a few rats with it, I was absolutely hooked. And of course, from there things evolved. We got bigger guns, the pair of us. We moved into shotguns, and we did some local pest control for farmers, and farmers got talking to other farmers. They said, well, we've got this problem, could you come and help us out? And we'd do that. We would turn up, we would go out all hours, we would put what I would call the legwork in. And then eventually that kind of led into a semi-professional career. So I've been doing it semi-professionally now in the UK for around 15 years, in particular controlling the foxes. That's probably my number one quarry. I love a bit of rat shooting and so on and so forth, but in that time I've been incredibly fortunate. Producing the online content has opened quite a few doors for me, and I've worked with suppliers directly who have both given me kit and loaned me kit to use, which has been great for being able to produce the content. At the same time, and I've always said this from the very beginning, I wouldn't endorse the kit or tell you that I would allow my friends and family to go ahead and buy the kit if I didn't mean it. So, you know, if I tell you something's good, it's good. I have sent plenty of kit back because I just couldn't or wouldn't say that it was any good when in fact it wasn't. You know, I wouldn't feel comfortable encouraging people to spend their hard-earned money on kit if I didn't think it was worth it. So I call it giving it the Team Foxer seal of approval. Some of the essential kit we'll come on to just shortly. Some people often ask me, and again, getting into it for yourself, maybe for the first time, people are going to want to know what motivates you. You know, what's the driving force behind getting into shooting? I think mine was, again, it came from a very early age. I had a real keen interest in the countryside and stuff. And I think it also depends on the motivation. It depends on what type of shooting it is that you're getting into. A lot of people have this romanticised idea of the hunter out in the wilderness, pitching yourself against nature and all the rest of it. And that is true. There are certainly elements of that, but foxing's a little bit different. Now for me, I sum it up in one word, which is escapism. Time absolutely flies by when I'm out, especially by myself, which is, if I'm brutally honest, one of my favourite types of foxing. I love going out with a keeper, Rick and Mark and others as well, and Dwayne, you know, guys that are proper solid and I've shot with now for a number of years. But at the same time, I love going out by myself. It is a real escapism. You know, when you work full time and you've got a family and the other trials and tribulations of just normal life, time completely runs away with you. You're solely focused on the job in hand, and it's incredibly therapeutic. So it's great for your mental health. Other times I'm shooting simply because I'm being paid to do it and it's a job, so barely any other reason than that. I still enjoy it to a degree. I wouldn't do it if I didn't, but also there are times where I shoot purely for the social aspect. So my birthday falls in August and there's a clay ground not that far away, so typically I'll gather a couple of mates up and we'll go and shoot some clays and just have a general laugh and take the mickey out of each other. So that's also you know, a great aspect of shooting. When the game season comes round again, that's incredibly sociable, and I enjoy that just as much as the actual shooting part of the day as well. Foxing, it can be like that, but ultimately, again, you need to be quiet most of the time, so you can have a good laugh when you're in the car going to and from the various different stands and stuff. If you're out on foot as a pair, as a twosome, again, that can be quite tricky. It's not so much of the social aspect, but it is about kind of you know, watching your mates back, making sure that you're communicating, whispering and being quiet and so on. And that itself brings a different level of enjoyment, but it's quite different at the same time. So going back to it, my motivation for getting out there, and I'm sure you guys will be very similar as well, the motivation for shooting comes from that desire to get out there and kind of just lose yourself in it, and it's very, very therapeutic. My favourite thing to shoot and hunt is probably the fox. It's an apex predator, and it's incredibly cunning. It takes a long time, I think, to become proficient in the art of foxing. It is not as easy as rocking up, there it is, pull the trigger and bang. I mean, sometimes it works like that, and that's just fortuitous if it ever does happen like that. There are times where I've rocked up, put the caller on, the fox has come in, and you know, the job's done and dusted within 20 minutes, and people are like, oh, that didn't take you long. And there are times where you'll go, put the caller out, you've done everything the same as the time before and you see nothing, but you know damn well it's there, and you know what, that's just foxing. It's like fishing, and I'm sure there are many other comparisons to it as well. But the reason I like going after foxes is because it can be so challenging. There's a host of stuff that you need to have right. You know, the weather's got to be right, the call has got to be right, and the wind, you've got to play the wind, and there are just so many variables, and I think it's a real test of bushcraft skills, knowledge, and patience, which is not something I was born with, as my missus will tell you. So it's just one of the best and most therapeutic and beautiful animals to go out and get. It's a shame that they cause so much damage, really, but you know, that's life for you. So I think it probably goes without saying they're nocturnal animals, so the best time is quite simply at night. At In the summer months, they're out pretty much as soon as it gets dark, because it doesn't get dark until 9:30, 10 p.m, probably even later. Some nights, so usually, especially young foxes, because young foxes are out early in the summer, then they'll be out as soon as it gets dark. Other times, and I find the most kind of efficient time to go out foxing is somewhere between 1 and 3 a.m. So 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. That's not the best time for you to go out, because normally it's when we're having our REM sleep. So you know, naturally your body wants to be asleep. But again, out foxing, I was actually out last night with the gamekeeper until 3 o'clock during the summer when we're really busy at work, and I worked a silly amount of hours. But it didn't feel like it, because I was so focused on what I was doing, and you know, it goes back to what I was saying before about just kind of losing yourself in that moment, and being so focused that you kind of forget about everything else, including tiredness. But the time to go out is when it gets dark in the summer months. My favourite time of year to go out would be probably somewhere between October and probably March, April time, so autumn into early spring. And the reason for that is crops are quite low, so there's not much stuff in the field, so you've got great visibility. The weeds in the ditches and dikes for me have all died down or haven't grown yet, so again, it's all about visibility. Younger foxes that were born earlier in that season are out, they've got their own territories now, so the families have kind of segregated, they're slightly more widespread. And again, as you go into the colder months when foxes are pairing up, there's that aspect of it as well. So those are my favourite kind of times to go out hunting foxes. How long do you go out for? Well, I'd say a typical foxing session for me is somewhere between 3 and 6 hours. I've done shorter, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, and I've done a lot longer. In fact, I've even been out until the sun came up the next day, although I certainly do that a lot less often these days. How far should I be shooting foxes at? Well, I would say this comes back to point number 1, which is practice, practice and practice some more. You should be very proficient at shooting your rifle at 100 yards. The industry standard typically is to sight your rifle in 1 inch high at 100 yards. Therefore, anything in a 200 yard, you should be able to just point it at the target area, squeeze the trigger and know that it's going to go down. Target on a fox is a rough kind of 6-inch diameter. I always go for the engine room, and I would say my average distance is somewhere around the 100 to 130 yards. Average foxes and most people will be taking distances anything from 80 again to 150 yards on average. You will see plenty of online footage of people taking foxes further than that. I have as well. I think the closest fox I've ever shot was 21 yards, and the furthest fox was 341 yards. And everything in between. But yeah, as a general rule of thumb, your average distance should and would be in or around the 120, 130 yards. What are typical fox behaviours? Well, foxes are very much just like cats and just like dogs. They're almost a perfect blend of the two. They've got a very keen bank of senses, incredible eyesight, really good hearing, impeccable sense of smell, probably one of the best in the animal kingdom. But they're also very curious as well, and we all know what curiosity did to the cat. So we can play on those. They're also very good at using the atmospherics to their advantage, but it's also something we can turn around and use to our advantage. So for example, here in the UK we get relatively mild and warm summers, and we also get some quite cold winters. Winter falls within that period where I prefer to be out foxing. Therefore, if we've had 4 or 5 days of particularly harsh cold weather, but it's a relatively mild evening on the 5th or 6th night, that's also the same time that the fox will be out looking for food, and they're quite likely to be hungry, so a great time to be out calling. But you then need to be one step ahead, so use things like wind direction, ambient noise, if it's a relatively light evening because there's a bright moon. Don't let people tell you can't go foxing on full bright moons, because you can. I've been foxing on super moons where it's like daylight outside. As long as you get hidden in shadows and utilise those things, as well as the wind direction, you can still get success. But again, if it's working for you or working against you, it's also working against the fox. So the fox is going to be out hunting its prey will be able to see because it's light and so on. So think about that as you go foxing, but you can definitely utilize you know, your surroundings as well as the fox's kind of natural sense of curiosity by using things like electronic callers, mouth callers, squeakers and other things like that to call them in. So a fairly big question then that comes up a lot is, how do I get started foxing? Well, I could probably do an entire video on the aspects of obtaining your gun license, permissions, and that's probably the biggest hurdle for the vast majority of people. But let's just say you have those things in place. So you've got somewhere to go, you've got yourself a firearms license, and you've got a chosen caliber, and you can afford to feed it, as ammo is not particularly cheap here in the UK. Great, so the best thing you can do, having practiced on the range, is probably go out with somebody locally first. Unless you've got a super urgent fox job, then it's probably going to be a suck it and see job with that, and just watch as many YouTube videos as you can. But one of the best things you could do is actually get out there with somebody that's been foxing and kind of knows the ropes, to be able to show you in the flesh. I learn from kind of seeing and then doing. You know, I'm what I call monkey see, monkey do. I very seldom will be able to kind of read a bunch of text and then go and be able to implement something just from reading it. Similarly, I could probably watch a YouTube video and figure out how to do it, but I like to see it there and then probably even be able to ask some questions as well. But go with someone wherever you can. Go with different people, because people do different things, and what works for one may not necessarily work for the other. As a general rule of thumb though, by taking and absorbing in that information, you will find out what works for you, and that's something I've done as well. I've done a hell of a lot of kind of making mistakes, learning from those mistakes, but I've also watched, even in the last few years, watched other people's videos and learned about different types of kit and some other hints and tips and things that might work better for me. Get a budget and get the best kit that you can buy for that budget at being able to maintain it. So what I mean by that is, get a rifle suitable for foxing that you can afford to buy the ammo for. You can buy the cleaning kit for it, the cleaning rods, the patches, the sprays, the solvents, the bronze cleaning brushes, etc, etc. So it's not just about buying the rifle. Yeah, so if you've got a £2,000 budget to get set up, don't go spending £2,000 on a rifle, because you are going to need some other essential kit as well. Put both the hours and the legwork in. Put the hours in going out with people, learning. Put the legwork in going out searching for permissions, not just for foxing but for any other type of shooting that you might want to do as well. Rabbiting, ratting, those are two of some of the best enjoyable nights of shooting you'll get, and doing those like I did first will teach you lots of things that you might need for foxing. Stalking rabbits, there are many similarities with that as there are shooting foxes. Even shooting rats, again, it's predominantly done at night, and you will use the air rifle if you go on a decent ratting permission a lot, and in doing so, using that rifle in the dark, loading it becomes second nature. So again, you can use and transfer that skill set when you're out foxing. Don't just go after the obvious permissions. Yeah, Mrs. Biggs, who lives up the road and has a large garden and a very small chicken pen, you might have to visit there 2 or 3 times to capture that prolific fox that keeps taking one every now and then. But Mrs. Biggs may well have a niece or nephew that just so happens to be an estate manager on a 10,000 acre estate a mile or 2 up the road, and they're so grateful for the job that you did for their auntie that they give you the permission to shoot on their 10,000 acre estate. That's how things happen. I started shooting for small scale farmers and landowners, and it certainly led into shooting for neighbours and friends of their friends, etc, etc. And it's now got to a point I don't really need to find permissions anymore. Permissions find me. So, and if I can do it, you can do it too. Kit then. What kit do I need? That's a question I always get asked. And let's just assume we're talking again about foxing for now. Very much depends on your budget. You could probably kit yourself out in a crude foxing setup for as little as £700-800, and you can most definitely go north of £7,000 to £8,000. And I've pretty much done all of the above, so it very much depends on your budget. Let's go low scale for just a second, but the basics you're going to need clearly a rifle, ammunition, something to shoot off. So if you're going to be driving around a farm, pulling up and calling in certain areas, you can just shoot off of the vehicle. But I would recommend getting yourself a decent shooting stick or set of sticks. I use the CT3 HDs from Scott Country. They're phenomenally stable, but they're not cheap, so that's your £700-800 gone straight away. Primos trigger sticks you can pick up second hand. I've shot foxes at 140 yards off of those, and you can get them for around about £100. Scopes, if you're going to be looking at the lower end of budget, then you're going to be looking at day scopes with an add-on. So again, on the Scope Shack, Scope Bay, second-hand marketplaces like that on Facebook are a great place to pick up second-hand kit. I have also seen second-hand night vision kit for £300 or £400 now. As thermals got cheaper and lots of people have upgraded, there's more and more second-hand kit available. So the marketplaces are a great place to buy, but just do err on the side of caution, because it is unfortunately a world where lots of scammers also operate. So you want your rifle, you want your sticks. You don't need a spotter if you're doing it on a budget. For years we did the proper lamping thing where we used lamps, and you can buy a decent red torch that will see at several hundred yards, or pick out an eye shine at several hundred yards, and you can find those online for about £100. I've got them in the Team Foxer Amazon shop, the OPRO KL52, great little torch. So have a look at those. If you're on a budget, that's all you're really going to need. Set of shooting sticks, your rifle, and something to spot the fox with. Now, at the other end of this scale, and I mentioned I've kind of done it all, and I certainly think that when night vision first came out, I thought that was amazing. You know, we no longer had to scan around with lamps and get sets of eye shines, only to probably put the rifle on and for that eye shine to then disappear. We were able to kind of see things without them seeing us. It was great. But at that top end of the scale, you've now got thermal, and I firmly believe, and I did actually for quite a while, that the best thing to shoot with would be a thermal spotter and then go over to night vision. But I've been using a full thermal setup now for about 2 years, so both spotting with thermal and shooting with thermal. I've used a multitude of thermal scopes. I've been very fortunate to have several scopes loaned to me from all the main manufacturers, but I've stuck with and started working with in recent times the Hike Micro brand, and Hike's Stellar SQ50 thermal rifle scope is just a stunning piece of craftsmanship. It's super low profile, it's just like a normal day scope. It sits nice and low on the rifle, so it goes in the cabinet easy, so it's really pragmatic, super easy to focus. Battery life means you can go foxing all night, so if you are going to do those 6-7 hour sessions, no problem. No fumbling around changing batteries in the dark. It just works. The standby time, so as you turn it on, one of the best features for me is its quickness from coming off of standby. So tap the button, bang, it's on. You know, nice straightforward zoom where you'd expect to find it at the side of the rifle. So ergonomic, great for left-handers and right-handers alike, and it's just a stunning piece of kit to use. So that's my top thermal scope at the moment. And then similarly with the spotter, actually the Griffin, the GQ35L, mega little handheld spotter, phenomenal quality, great value, probably one of the best value products on the market. But I have always said looking with 2 eyes is better than 1. So when the Raptors came out, I was super excited to get hold of these, and these are just brilliant. Yeah, they are bigger than a normal spotter, but they're also better than a normal spotter. They see so far, and you just don't get eye fatigue. So that combination of the Stellar rifle scope and the Raptor spotter for me on a set of quality sticks like the CT3 HDs behind me here, or even off the bipod on the bonnet of the car. That's the most stable platform to shoot off. In fact, that's how we were shooting last night, off the top of the Land Rover. That's my top kit for foxing. My particular rifle is a Tikka, which is a great brand of rifle, and for me there isn't such a thing as an accurate rifle. There's a consistent rifle. They're different things. Accuracy comes from consistency, so you know, consistency in the metal, consistency in its construction, and consistency in the ammunition. The same amount of powder, the exact same bullet weight, the exact same shape. That's where accuracy comes from. So if you can get all of those things, if you can get consistent ammo, consistent rifle, a consistent scope, that's accuracy. And then you need to be consistent. You need to be consistent with the way you pull the trigger, you need to be consistent with your breathing, and you need to be consistent with everything else. And that full combination is where accuracy comes from. Get all of that, you've got yourself one hell of a foxer. There are a couple of other essential kit items I never go foxing without, such as my Icotec GC500 caller, then my mouth caller goes in my pocket. I have a little knife, a head torch, as well as a seeker torch as well. So what I'll do is I'll put a couple of kit lists in this video's description, a budget kit list, the basics that you'll need for foxing, and then I'll put a kind of Team Foxer's dream kit list down there as well. If you've got any queries or questions, please put a comment in this video's description. I'll do my very best to get back to you and answer them, though I will be on a holiday coming up for the next couple of weeks. All I want to say is thank you very much for watching. Take care, stay safe, all the very best if you're going out for the first time. Don't forget rule 1, practice, practice, practice. Take care, stay safe, and as always, happy shooting.